Hey there, fellow classic comic collectors. As always, I'm Scott Harris King, and in this episode, like the title suggests, this is it. It's the big one. And I don't mean like in Sanford and Son, where it has the big one. That's for all the people under the age of 50. Just trust me, that was a really on point cultural reference. But yeah, so this is in this episode I'm going to be showing off a book that I just got in. I wanted to do it separate from my haul videos because those are usually, like I get a bunch of stuff on eBay or go to a comic book store or whatever. This is one specific book, and I've got a story about it. It's also a book that I've really wanted for a long time. I thought I was never going to be able to get it, both because it's very expensive, but it's also legitimately hard to get. But through some series of circumstances that happened, I was able to acquire it finally, and so I'm really excited. It's not going to be an unboxing video. There's a little bit of an issue with UPS, so when it arrived, I had to open it right away to make sure it wasn't damaged. So it's already out of the box, but I'm gonna show that off. And this is one of my big Grail books. I know the word Grail can be overused. Some people don't like the word, and they think it's way overused in collecting. I actually really like the word Grail. I find it to be a really great descriptive term because at its heart, it means that you're getting a book that's really important to you. Everyone's, key doesn't really work for that, because key means that the people in general, the collecting group in general, thinks that this is an important book, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything to me. Like, there's lots of key books that I don't care about, but a Grail suggests that it's a key book for me personally. And so I really like that term. Because it also suggests and it implies that it's a book that is hard to get. Something you can get very easily isn't really a Grail, because the Grail you have to go on a quest for it. So it's like a personal book that has a lot of meaning to you, but that is hard for you to get and that you've been questing for and searching for. So I really like the term Grail a lot. I think it's much better than key. And so I have a lot of Grails. It's like that scene in Indiana Jones where there's all those cups and there's like, wow, how can they have 40 Grails? Well, it's sort of like that, but there are a couple big, like, legitimate Grail books, and this is one of them. So I've teased it enough. I'm going to give you one more hint as to what it could possibly be. Maybe this will give it away. Okay, I think it probably tipped you off. So here it is. You ready for this? It's Albedo or Albedo #2, the first appearance of Usagi Yojimbo. As you can see, it's just CGC restored, 8.5, minor restoration, small amount of color touch. Now, I looked into their official terms. When it says a small amount of color touch, it's supposed to mean just a couple, like the size of no more than a couple bindery chips. Their greater notes on this suggest that the color touch is along the bottom edge. If you look really closely at that bottom corner, you can see there's just a tiny bit of white scuffing along the edge. There's also a little bit on this corner, and that's where the color touch is supposed to be. My guess is that scuffing along the bottom edge, there were a couple dings that were more pronounced. I can't see it. I cannot see it with the naked eye. I find it a little bit odd that someone would color touch down there, because the reason it's an 8.5 is because there are spine ticks that are clearly visible. There's one right there. So why you would color in that thing at the bottom and not the other spine ticks, I don't know. And the way I received this book is from a friend of mine who's going to be a guest on the channel shortly, by the name of Shaxper. He is the person that founded the Classic Comics Forum that I'm a member of. It's a great place to talk about old comics, and he recently decided to sell off some of his big key books. And we were talking about, I really wanted the Albedo #2, but I thought it was going to be out of my price range because this book has just absolutely gone crazy the last few years. But when he got it back, it turned out it had this restoration that he didn't know about. And that's really unfortunate. And I feel bad for him because, he didn't know about the restoration, and so it drastically reduced the price of it. And so the good fortune for me is that actually put it in my price range. Now, for those who aren't really familiar with this book, it's an extremely difficult book to find. It's from 1984, and there were only 2,000 copies printed. So it's legitimately difficult book to find. There's not much supply, but there's a huge amount of demand. The character now is hard to believe, but getting close to now 40 years. The most recent issue just came out. It's still being published. The most recent one was volume 4, number 11, but they actually have the numbering on the inside, the legacy numbering. So it's issue 249, and that's of his solo title. The issues 2, 3, and 4 and Albedo come before he got his own solo title. And there's a lot of crossover appeal as well, because Usagi Yojimbo, being the anthropomorphic samurai character, obviously there was a lot in common with the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, who debuted at the same time, and the creators became friends. And so there's actually been a number of crossovers, and Usagi's appeared in the Teenage Mutant Ninja cartoon and as part of the toy line. And because of those, there's a huge demand for this from Turtles fans, as well as from fans of the series. And it's a really interesting that most of the fans of the series actually don't come from the individual comics, because this series has been wildly popular and hugely successful in the collected trades. There's something like, I don't know, 28 or 29 volumes of the trades, and it's carried in a lot of libraries and a lot of kids. It's something that get people into comics, like middle reader age. And it's just, for me, it's a work of genius. I absolutely love it. I already had Albedo 3 and 4, and I have a complete run of all 249 issues of the series. He had a few scattered appearances in between in a series called Critters that I still need to track down. I have some of those, but not all of them. But other than that, that's it. And so this was a big hole in my collection that I did not think I was ever going to be able to fill, because the prices have gone so crazy and it's so hard to find because there's so few copies. So I'm just absolutely thrilled to get this. And this is going right up into the top 10 in my collection, hands down. Top 5, probably. I'll have to think about it, because a couple of the books in my top 5 are very personal. But I think this is a top 5 book. Yeah, I think this gets into the top 5 in my collection. Absolutely ecstatic to have this. As I mentioned, there was some issues with UPS. The issue with UPS is that they just completely trashed it. It was packed pretty well. Shakespeare covered in bubble wrap and put it in a box and wrote "fragile" all over it, and then he sent it to me through sort of the next day or 2-day, whatever, the express through UPS, and with a signature required to make sure they didn't just chuck it on my doorstep. Well, guess what? They just chucked it on my doorstep. Obviously, because of the pandemic, I'm here at home all the time. I was waiting for the package, waiting to sign for it. They didn't even ring the doorbell. I just opened the door at one point to go out for a walk, and it was just lying there. So considering the huge amount of money that I spend on this, I really don't appreciate them just leaving there for anyone to walk off with. But more importantly, they completely wrecked it. The packaging, it had clearly been dropped hard on its corner. The box was split open, and there's actually damage on the CGC case where it impacted. You can see right there, you see that ding? That is courtesy of UPS. Luckily, it didn't cause any other structural damage, as far as I can tell, to the case. I've noticed that the inner well is actually slightly bent, but I don't think that would be as a result of this. It's just, I think, maybe a matter of temperature variations causing it to bend. I'm going to look into it a little bit, but luckily, like the pegs on the inside sometimes break on these CGC cases. That's fine. So the CGC case did its job. It protected the comic. And again, it doesn't seem to have any damage to either the comic or the case other than the scuff, so I'm not going to get it reholdered. But I was really, really irritated with UPS. And like the signature thing is something you pay extra for, is to have a signature required, but they Apparently, they just use the pandemic as an excuse not to even bother with that. They just charge you extra money and don't actually provide any service for it. So UPS just absolutely terrible, just terrible. Besides dropping it on its corner and splitting it open and damaging the case, they had also clearly dropped something on top of the box, because the top of the box was also crushed in, but luckily the bubble wrap protected any damage from happening on the front of the case. So just a disaster from UPS perspective, just absolutely terrible, but luckily it came through fine, and I'm just so excited to get it. The other thing I wanted to talk about in this video, though, is managing your collection, because now that I have this, I have to pay for it. I mean, I've already sent checks for the money, but I want to get the money back from my end, because I try and keep my collection as close to break even as I can. And this is a very significant outlay of money for me. I paid 5 times as much for this as I've ever paid for any comic in my entire collecting history. So this is a huge purchase for me. And what that means is I'm going to be selling off a bunch of comics from my collection. Now there's a number of different things that I'm going to be doing. I was already in the process of culling my collection because it's just too large. So there's a number of things that I'm getting rid of for space reasons. So these are decisions that I think all collectors have to go through at one point or another in their collecting experience, is deciding what's important to you, what's not so important, what you want to keep, what you want to get rid of. You know, tastes change, prices and values change. Something that meant a lot to you once maybe doesn't mean as much to you now, or something still means something to you, but now it's worth so much that the money means more to you, or things that you don't care about that are now valuable and it makes sense to get rid of them, or, you know, lots of different factors go into it. You know, the thing that's important to me is what do I feel about the comic? I have a number of comics that are worth a fair amount of money that I don't really have an emotional attachment to, either because my collecting tastes have changed or because I just picked them up for random reasons. And so they didn't really fit into my collection to begin with. And so what I'm doing and have been doing for the last little while, ever since the idea of buying this sort of happened, is I've been going through my collection. I've been deciding what I'm going to keep and what I'm going to sell. And there's a number of books that I'm going to be selling. One thing, you know, I've been buying a lot of comics this year, so this is an ongoing process. I've already sold a bunch of stuff to make room and to pay for the new stuff coming in. I've got a giant pile here that I haven't put away of probably 75 back issues that I've gotten just over the last like 3 or 4 months, because I just put everything away 3 or 4 months ago, and now I've got these piles of comics that need to be put away again because I've been getting them in, and that means I'm gonna be selling stuff out. So the other thing is that, like, when I look back, I've only been doing the YouTube here for a few months, and you know, I really kicked it off with my top 50 video, and then I did a second, like my next top 50. That top 50 video is going to look completely different when I do it next year, because not only have I gotten in a bunch of like tremendous books for my collection this year, such as this, that are immediately going into my top 50, and there's several others that I've gotten. But there's books that were in my previous top 50 that I'm no longer going to own because I'm selling them to raise the money for these. And so some of the big ones that are going to be gone from my collection because I need to pay for purchases like this. The big one is the Betty and Veronica 41. I have a CGC 7.0, which is the second highest graded copy, and that's one that I'm going to be selling, and you know, I expect that'll bring in a big chunk of change. I have decent, nice-looking mid-grade copies of Journey into Mystery 86 and 87, aka Thor number 4 and Thor number 5. I'll be selling those. Those are the big ones. I've also got a pile of stuff that over the last couple years I've been picking up when I go to comic shows and I go to stores. I'm always looking through back issue bins, and when I see things that I think are really underpriced or I know I can flip for a significant profit, I'll pick them up with the idea someday I'll sell them. Well, that day's now, so I've got a pile of those books that I picked up with the intention of reselling. And so, yeah, I just want to talk about a little bit about the thought process behind that, because it's something that I know everyone has to do at some point. So as much as I derive enjoyment from those comics, nothing, lasts forever. You can't take it with you. And so, I've had all sorts of key issues that I regret getting rid of, but I've had lots of other key issues that have gone through my collection at one point or another that I don't regret getting rid of, but it's fun to have owned them. So, and I guess that brings me back around to the idea of the Grail, because those books are now with people that really, really wanted them. So things like Batman 181 or Batman 171, Spider-Man 39, Spider-Man 40, Spider-Man 129, Hulk 181. These are all books that I've had in my collection and I've gotten rid of because they just didn't mean that much to me. The big one that I regret getting rid of because I got rid of it so cheap and lost money on it somehow is Fantastic Four #5. But, these are books that I don't really have an emotional connection to. It's cool to have owned them at one point in my life. And, now that I'm getting older, the end is not near, hopefully, but I can see it on the horizon. And you start to get the idea that the feeling that you're just a custodian for these, because eventually, you're going to be gone and the books will remain and they'll find new homes with other collectors. And so that's kind of the way I feel about a lot of these books that I'm getting rid of. Yes, they're great. Am I sad about not having them more? Not really. I've really enjoyed them in the time that I've had. Now I have new books coming in that I'm enjoying now. And so someone else that enjoys them more, that these books mean more to, there's someone out there that is just going to be so thrilled to get a Betty and Veronica 41. And I'm thrilled that the money will help me pay for this Albedo #2. So that's it for this episode. I just want to end with a little in memoriam section saying goodbye to all the comics that are going to be leaving my collection to pay for this Albedo #2. Thank you so much, comics. I love you, and I hope you find a wonderful new home. Goodbye.